Episode 5 of the 2 Minute Drill podcast. Jim Monaghan and Chris Swendeman. And Swendy, thankfully, the NFL season for the local teams, well, for everybody, but the NFL regular season ended for the Jets and Giants yesterday with varying degrees of results. But it's finally over. Our long local nightmare has ended.
It ended in week one and went 16 more weeks than it should have. Both teams it was just a mercy killing at this point for both teams. I mean, two teams going in very kind of similar trajectories, I would say, both looking at quarterbacks, but both had similar problems throughout the season. And it was just painful for the fans. The fans are the ones that suffer out of everybody. And man, it was a brutal year for New York football fans.
So we'll start with the Jets. And I'm sure you saw the graphic of the banner upside down on the field
Right.
before the game. I mean, if that isn't a metaphor for what's been going on with the organization. And then Rodgers, first pass, interception, you're thinking, uh-oh, here we go. Everything settles down, and he has one of probably the best game of his Jets career. There's no question about it. And you're thinking, maybe he has something left in the tank. Maybe we should bring him back next year. But you know there'll be a new GM. You know there's going to be a new coach. And if you're Aaron Rodgers, why would you want to subject yourself to that, including an owner who a few weeks into the season wanted to bench you?
Yeah, Jim. If you're Aaron Rodgers, there are so many reasons why the Jets and Rodgers just need to amicably split. They need to go their separate ways. If Rodgers wants to play this year, next year, a lot of people inside have been saying that Rodgers has already kind of made his decision that they think he's not going to come back. But if he does, it needs to be elsewhere. This is not the place for him. The Jets need to hit the reset button, hard reset button, not a soft reset. They just need to redo things, get a coach and a GM in here to build their own team and build it up from the ground up, and just let Rodgers ride out into the sunset, whether it's retirement or one final team. Let him do it somewhere else. New York is not for him.
And speaking of coaches and the Jets, Mike Vrabel interviewing over the weekend, reports said that the interview went very well. But again, why would Mike Vrabel want to subject himself to a Woody Johnson owned team?
I don't know. I mean, sometimes you take the interviews to go through the motions to kind of get some warm up pitches. If we're using a baseball analogy, I don't know why Vrabel will come here. If I'm someone close to in Vrabel's camp, I'm telling him you don't want any part of this mess and disaster unless you are so hell bent on putting your stamp on a team to say, look what I did. Then the Jets are the team for you because you have nowhere to go but up.
But the question you have to ask then for any of these guys coming in to interview for the Jets, am I going to be allowed to put my stamp on it? You don't know who the GM is right now. You do know who the owner is. And to say he's a little flaky, I think is an understatement. And then tomorrow on Tuesday, well, it's the return of Rex Ryan, who says he's interested in the job and he's interviewing. And let's, put a tent over this circus.
I mean, you and I might as well go for interviews of the Jets at this point because, well, I mean, it's just like a cavalcade of, yo, you want to interview for the Jets job? Sure, come on in. Why not? I mean, anybody else we could think of? I mean, it's out of control. I mean, I think Rex Ryan may have been the most interesting coach for the Jets in the last 20, 30 years. But I mean, to me, other than maybe Parcells, but I mean, think of it. Think of some of the coaches that have been here, or in Belichick's case, not been here. Who didn't want to be here. It just, I feel like they need somebody that is going to be able to take the reins, work with a GM, and deal with the nonsense that you have in the owner. I mean, it starts there, Jim. When you all is said and done, it starts with the ownership, and same could be said, across the other side of the locker room with the Giants.
Indeed. And in fact, speaking of Giants ownership, shortly after the game ended, a statement coming from John Mara saying that he and Steve Tisch had decided we're bringing back the coach, we're bringing back the GM, and we want to move forward with these two. I think they're going to be on a short leash, to be honest with you, but at least there's some stability there for whatever that's worth.
I mean, after this year's debacle, I don't know how they do. What's the definition of insanity, Jim?
Doing the
Doing
same
the
thing over and over and expecting a different result.
Giant fans, get ready because next year it may be a lot of the same. Other than you have the number 3 pick, which is good. That's a good start. And the other good thing for Giant fans, there are no quarterbacks from North Carolina that are going to be in this draft, so you guys are safe.
And speaking of
Duke, actually, Duke.
Duke,
Sorry,
that's correct.
Duke quarterbacks. But you know, and John Mara came out. I don't know if you saw, but John Mara said, "Listen, we've made the decision. They're coming back. This is going to be on me." So, okay, well, when wasn't it on you? You're the owner. It doesn't it all weigh at your feet ultimately. So, what's going to be different when it doesn't work next year? You're going to be like, all right, well, maybe I should have got rid of him a year ago. That's not going to sit well with the fans.
True, and I understand your point, but to hear an owner say it's on me, and that's what Robert Kraft did yesterday after the Patriots win over Buffalo. What a surprise that was, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And just said he was, firing Gerard Mayo after just one season. But he said, this is on me, which everybody who's a Patriots fan knew that already. And if you were paying any amount of attention, you knew that Mayo, who I think has the capability to be a good NFL head coach, he was just in over his head. Being the guy after the guy, even though
Never.
Belichick had a
No.
down season or two at the end of his Patriots run, but you're still replacing the greatest coach of all time. That's impossible.
Yeah, I mean the shoes weren't even. I mean, you talk about filling shoes. They're not even in the same zip code. I mean, and no offense to Jerome Mayo, but you're talking about a Hall of Fame coach with one of the most established careers ever for a head coach, and you bring in a guy who's barely ever coached at all to be the head coach after him. You're never gonna. That's a no-win situation from the get-go. And you know what? After 1 year, I don't think it's fair. But Kraft owns the team, and he could do what he wants.
Vrabel, by the way, is also expected to be up in New England for an interview, and I think that might be a very good landing spot for him. And Josh McDaniels' name has been tossed in with Vrabel as well, coming back as the offensive coordinator. Taking a look at the draft, as it stands right now, barring any trades, you have the Titans who need a quarterback. You have the Browns, you have the Giants at number 3. They need a quarterback. Then the Patriots, who, if May continues to develop, don't need one. And then at 5, it's the Jaguars, Raiders at 6, the Jets at 7, Panthers, Saints, and Bears at 8, 9, and 10. And again, that is barring any trades.
Right. I mean, there are a lot of there are a few teams there, Giants and Jets included, that need quarterbacks in a not very quarterback heavy draft. So this is going to be very interesting to see how teams maneuver to get what they need. Are teams going to move up? Are the Titans in Cleveland going to stay put and take quarterbacks? Because, I mean, Cleveland is no lock to not take a quarterback, especially with the Watson debacle going on. So, it all depends on how desperate a team gets. Will the Giants be desperate enough to call either Cleveland or Tennessee and be like, hey, what do you want for that, first or second pick?
Yeah, it's definitely possible if the Giants want to play, trading up for
Right.
that. It's definitely possible that they can get the guy that they want, even if they don't have the number 1 pick. We mentioned last week in our last episode that I was going to the ABCA, American Baseball Coaches Association meeting in Washington, D.C. There were probably close to 10,000 coaches there. It was amazing.
Wow.
And, a wide variety of speakers. One of the things that came out of it, and unfortunately, I did not get a lot of time to talk to D1 coaches, but the thing that was going around the room was, and we had mentioned about the portal and all of the different
Yep.
changes, the D1 coaches are a little lost as to what the next step is for them between NIL money, JUCOs now not going. If you go to junior college for 2 years, that doesn't count towards
Right.
your NCAA. So you spend all this time recruiting a kid who may show up in the fall, find out that he's not going to play in the spring, and say, you know what? Adios.
See ya. I'm
Yeah.
out. I mean, the entire college landscape has changed. I don't, maybe for the better for the players, it shifted from, always being beneficial for the schools and not beneficial at all for the players.
Not at all.
Now the tables have turned complete 360. And now the players have all the power pretty much. You're not starting me? All right, I'm out. See ya. And on to the next. I'm going into the portal. So I think at some point there has to be some kind of balance, because right now I feel like it's just completely player heavy.
Not only is it player heavy, but it's top school heavy as well, because you get some of these other schools. We'll stay in baseball for a second. A school like Seton Hall, a school like Rutgers, attractive programs, nice records, strong head coaches, but they don't have the NIL money that some of these Power Fives can offer.
No, they don't. And I mean, kudos to Rutgers, by the way, for that signing that they just had the other day. Darryl Strawberry's grandson, one of the top prospects, and Rutgers landed him. So, I mean, even without that, NIL money, props to them for still recruiting good, young talent. But you can't survive when you have, the Vandy's of the world and all these other schools that are basically cash cows because of, what they can offer versus the smaller schools.
Indeed. We're still waiting for Pete Alonso to sign. I think his market has continued to shrink with every passing day. I do think he's going to end up with the Mets at a substantially lower amount than what he was looking for. But I do think he ends up in a Met uniform when all is said and done.
I agree. I think so. And you know what? The longer they wait, the more it benefits the Mets at this point, because the contract demands are just going to get less and less and less. Unless there's some dark horse team waiting in the wings that are looking at Pete Alonso and are just going to wait to see what kind of deal they can get and who's going to blink first. But I think that's going to happen. The standoff is going to happen with the Mets. Somebody's going to blink and he's going to go back to where, because you know what? For the Mets, if you sign Soto and then lose Alonso, it's like gaining a foot and losing an arm. It's like you need to have them kind of both, like to have that, protection in the lineup for Soto. And I think Alonso would be a great fit for that.
And with that, we wrap up week 5 of the 2-Minute Drill podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, click like and subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. And Swendeman, we'll talk again next week.
You got to enjoy the games this week. Talk to you next week, Jim.